Alright, so here's an MRE Basics video, which isn't really about MREs, and it really isn't all that basic, but it's still something I thought would be a good idea to do. The Humanitarian Daily Ration, or HDR, is something I've never reviewed before, and I've been lucky enough to get two of these sent to me by, actually one was sent by Gundog4314, one was sent by Steve1989 MRE Info. And because of the fact that they're something different, something I've never reviewed, and something kind of on the rare side, something you don't see every day, I figured it'd be worth giving some background information on them. And I figured by putting it in the MRE Basics, it would be a place if somebody could look for this information, and when I do the actual reviews, they won't take quite as long to do, because I won't have to give all this information twice. So basically in this video, we're going to look at what a humanitarian daily ration is, and what it isn't. And we're also going to compare it to a standard MRE to see how it's similar and how it differs from one of those. And the first thing I want to do is explain exactly what an HDR is. And rather than explaining it in my own words, I'm going to actually go right to the source. MREinfo.com has a lot of information on HDRs and pretty much any other ration you can think of. That's where I went to get this information, which actually came from the Defense Logistics Agency website. And it states that the original requirement for the HDR was based on a need identified by the DSCA-HAD, or Defense Security Cooperation Agency, Humanitarian Assistance Demining Activities, for a means of feeding large populations of displaced persons or refugees under emergency conditions. And more specifically, the components are designed to provide a full day's sustenance to a moderately malnourished individual. In order to provide the widest possible acceptance from the variety of potential consumers with diverse religious and dietary restrictions from around the world, the HDR contains no animal products or animal byproducts, except that minimal amounts of dairy products are permitted. Alcohol and alcohol-based ingredients are also banned. So that gives you a lot of information. I've mentioned before that MREs are obviously designed for U.S. soldiers, but they have been used as in disaster relief situations, for instance Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy. And I believe they're given out around the world in disaster situations too. But of course, a lot of MREs, most MREs, are meat-based. A lot of them are beef, chicken, or pork-based. There are a few vegetarian meals in each case, but even those, they're not strict, they're not vegan or anything like that, and probably is animal products in them, even though they're considered vegetarian. So obviously they saw that there was a need for something that could be eaten by pretty much anyone. I mean, obviously someone's going to be able to find a problem with anything. And obviously if you're designing something that you're going to be able to airdrop to people anywhere in the world, you're going to want something that the most people are going to be able to eat. So because of all the religious, cultural, and any other kind of concerns, they obviously went for pretty strict guidelines for these. So now we'll take a look at just what's similar and what's different between an HDR and an MRE. First off, they have a pretty similar appearance. The main difference and the most obvious thing is the color. MREs are in a tan bag because they're basically a tactical kind of food, whereas HDRs are trying to be pretty much as bright as possible and as visible as possible. So they're in this salmon color. Originally they were in yellow, which is probably even more bright, but for various reasons, which are touched on at MREinfo.com, they switched it to this salmon color. I don't know what you call this, red, pink, or something, but I guess it's called salmon. So MRE does give you some basic information on it, but the HDR, they're figuring that people are going to be seeing this anywhere in the world. It says, food gift from the people of the United States of America. That's, nice touch if somebody happens to be able to read English. And it does say this bag contains 1 day's complete food requirement for one person, also in Spanish and French. And there's going to be people who won't speak English, Spanish, or French, of course, who will be getting these. So they also try to make it very basic and give you some basic information where it's showing that this is food. And it's showing that's from the United States. Inside, I believe there is a instruction card that gives you very, very, very basic instructions on what you're supposed to do with this, which is to do what this is doing, to basically tear it open and eat it. So the bag is the same type of bag. It's definitely a thick, durable bag, and a lot of commercial MREs have thinner bags, but I think that these are up to the same standards as the MRE because they're supposed to be able to be airdropped. And they also have the same shelf life. They're supposed to be good for 3 to 5 years, just like an MRE. The main difference, of course, is that an MRE is meant to be a meal ready to eat, or one meal. So an active soldier would be expected to eat 3 of these in one day. It's not always going to happen, but that's the idea. The HDR, while similar in size, a little bit thicker, but otherwise visually kind of similar in size, is intended to be a 24-hour ration, or sustenance for a complete day. The US has a 24-hour ration, the First Strike ration, which, while not too much bigger than an MRE, does contain more calories and more nutrients to keep you going for 24 hours. So a single MRE has an average of about 1,250 calories, and that's meant for one meal. An HDR, the regulations state that it's to have no less than 2,200 calories. So obviously that's not even the same amount as 2 regular MREs. But we are talking about that these are for refugees, people in disaster situations where they're just, you're basically just trying to keep them alive. They're not going to be people who are going to be out, well, hopefully they're not going to be in combat or some kind of like really active situations. They're going to be kind of like in a refugee camp, and they're going to just basically need food. If you can't bring actual food to them, then this is going to give them 2,200 calories per day if they get one of these. And that would be better than the 1,200 calories provided by a single MRE, or having to figure out if you're going to give them 2 or 3 MREs or whatever. So because of that, they're pretty similar in weight. I'm going to actually weigh these. Just this is just going to get an idea of a general idea of how much an MRE weighs. But let's see how much the 2 of these weigh. All right, so an MRE, this is just menu number 1 chili with beans, just to give an idea. And this one comes in at 1 pound 8.6 ounces, or 696 grams. And the Humanitarian Daily Ration is 2 pounds 2.4 ounces, or 974 grams. So obviously we're talking about 2 very different things here. Despite the fact that they're made at the same standards, they're both ready to eat. They're for very different situations and very different populations. Probably the last thing, we've covered quite a bit, and I think the last thing I want to mention about the outside of these is that the HDRs are made by the same 3 companies that make MREs for the US government. Sepaco, Ameriqual, and the Warner Company. And I believe that's why you see a difference here, although they basically have the same design. This one here, I'm not sure which company made this one, but it has the repeating design that old MREs used to have, because that's to make sure that they would get at least one example of the entire graphic. This one right here is by the Warner Company, and it has a larger graphic, and it takes up the middle of the bag. So there are 5 menus in the HDR, and this actually gets pretty complicated because although there's only 5 menus, so it sounds like there isn't that much of variety, each menu has 3 different variants. And I believe that's based on the companies which make them. So although this is menu number 3, there's 3 different things that could be. They do have the menus on MREinfo.com and the Defense Logistics Agency website. So you can see that when you open up one of these, you're going to get one of these 3 meals, even though it says menu number 3. So you can see that over the 5 menus, there's actually going to be 15 different menus. But they're not really, there's nothing really exceptional about these. It's a lot of rice and beans, lentils kind of things, and there's a lot of breads, crackers, carbohydrates in there. So it's not going to be the same as an MRE. I think that's about enough of the outside. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at what's inside of an HDR and see how that differs from an MRE. So here are the components of this HDR menu number 3. While it is meant for a whole day's nutrients, it does only have 2 entrees, or what you'd call entrees. These kind of would probably be more like what you'd find as a side dish in an MRE, but they are actually full size. They are 8.5 ounces, which is a little bit bigger than an MRE entree. And as I mentioned, each of the 5 menus has 3 different variants, depending on which company made it. And this one is apparently made by Sepaco. Most of the components seem to be from Sepaco. And the entrees are vegetable barley stew and rice with vegetable, which means that this is menu number 3 and variant B. So in addition to the entrees, we also have vegetable crackers, peanut butter and strawberry jam, fig bar, unfrosted toaster pastry brown sugar, shortbread cookie, and the accessory kit, which includes the standard MRE brown spoon, a napkin, salt and pepper, crushed red pepper, sugar, a wet nap, which apparently does not have any alcohol in it, it's not alcohol based, and a pack of matches. As far as differences between an HDR and an MRE, the most obvious one is the color of the packaging. Not only the outer bag being salmon rather than tan, but also the inner components. There's nothing tactical about them. They're not meant to be hidden or, help you to not be seen by the enemy. These are MREs are usually in these green or brown pouches, while the HDR components are in silver foil pouches. You can see here there's crackers and crackers. Basically the exact same product, just different packaging. And the entrees are going to have the same silver foil. Another little difference between an HDR and an MRE, and it's sort of interesting that it has the sugar because there's actually nothing really to put the sugar in or on. I mean, obviously you could sweeten up any of these things if you wanted to, but usually the sugar is in an MRE for the coffee. But in this one, there's no coffee or any other drink in the accessory pack, like you'd usually find in a regular MRE accessory pack, the coffee. There's no coffee and there's no other beverages. There's no fruit beverage-based powders, there's no cocoa beverage, no coffee drinks. Basically, I guess this is just the food stuff, and everything in here can be just torn open and eaten as is. And I guess as far as water is concerned, that would be a separate concern as far as how to get that to the refugees. So there's no beverages, and there's also no flameless ration heater. So that's basically what an HDR is, what an HDR isn't, and what's inside of an HDR. And so next I'm going to be doing reviews on the two HDRs that I have, menu number 3 and menu number 5. Hope this information was of use to somebody, and thank you for watching.